Have you ever wondered why so many long-married women seem more irritated with their husbands as they age? Why that light in their eyes slowly dims, not because of aging, but because of something deeper, something heavier? You might think it's just old married couple stuff, but what's really happening is often more serious than most people want to admit. Behind the quiet sighs, the eye rolls at the dinner table, or the long silences during car rides, there are years, sometimes decades, of buried emotions, unmet needs, and growing disconnection. This video isn't about blaming anyone. It's not about making husbands feel like villains or turning wives into martyrs. It's about understanding a real pattern that shows up in countless marriages as people grow older, especially among women. And the truth is, most men never see it coming. They wake up one day and realize their wives seem cold, distant, even resentful, and they don't know why. But here's the thing. Those feelings didn't show up overnight. They've been building quietly over years of small moments, missed chances to connect, unspoken disappointments, needs that went unnoticed. So whether you're a husband who's noticing a change, a wife who's silently aching, or simply someone who wants to better understand this phase of life, we invite you to stay with us. Because what you learn here could be the key to healing, years of distance or preventing it altogether. Let's take a deep, honest look at 5 surprising reasons why this happens. And more importantly, what we can do to face it with compassion, clarity, and courage. Reason 1, emotional neglect wears her down slowly. One of the most overlooked reasons women grow to resent their husbands with age isn't something loud or dramatic. It's something quiet, so quiet, that most men don't even realize they're doing it. It's emotional neglect. And no, this doesn't mean a man is mean or abusive or absent. It means he stops showing up in ways that matter most, not physically but emotionally. You see, in the early years of marriage, most husbands try. They listen, they check in, they remember things. But as life gets busier, kids, work, bills, routines, many men unintentionally shift into what I call maintenance mode. They stop asking their wives how they really feel. They stop noticing the small signs of stress. They start assuming that silence means everything's fine. And slowly, year after year, a woman's emotional tank runs dry. Now, why does this happen, especially as women get older? It's because in later life, the distractions disappear. The kids move out, the career slows down, the house gets quieter, and suddenly there's time to feel again, time to reflect, time to realize I've spent 30 years giving, and I don't even know if he sees me anymore. That realization is devastating, and if it's not addressed, it leads to withdrawal, sarcasm, and yes, sometimes even hate. I remember talking to a 72-year-old woman named Linda. She said, "He's a good man. He's never cheated, never hit me, never left. But he's never asked me how I feel about anything since 1994. That sentence hit me like a brick. Because that's what emotional neglect looks like. It's not loud, it's not obvious, but it's heartbreaking. The good news is this can be reversed. Emotional neglect doesn't mean a marriage is doomed, but it does require awareness. It requires a man to start noticing again, to ask, to listen, to show up not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent care. And for a woman to feel safe enough to speak honestly again. Because when a woman finally says, "You haven't seen me in years," that's not a complaint. That's a last attempt at connection. And when that moment comes, ignoring it means losing more than just a conversation. It means losing the very thing that brought you together in the first place. Reason 2, built up resentment from unequal responsibilities. As the years go by, one of the most common emotional patterns I've seen among older women is this: they don't just get tired, they get tired of being tired alone. It's not about one big moment or dramatic betrayal. It's the accumulation of decades of feeling like they've carried more than their fair share without recognition. That quiet, persistent weight eventually turns into something heavier: resentment. Let's look at the rhythm of a long-term marriage. In many homes, especially those that began in the 1960s or 70s, there were certain unspoken agreements. He brought home the paycheck. She managed everything else. That meant cooking, cleaning, raising the kids, remembering birthdays, planning holidays, caring for elderly parents, and handling 1,000 little daily decisions. And even when she began working outside the home, the household responsibilities rarely shifted in any meaningful way. So what happens after 30, 40, even 50 years of this? A woman reaches a point where she feels used up, not by one specific act, but by a lifetime of being expected to hold everything together while her partner just helped out occasionally. That phrase, helped out, says it all. Because you don't help out with something that's equally yours. You participate. You co-own it. And many women never truly felt that from their husbands. One woman I met, Karen, who's now 68, told me something that stayed with me. She said, "I don't hate my husband because he's a bad person. I hate the way I became invisible every time there was work to be done. I handled the kids' fevers, the funeral arrangements, the mortgage paperwork, and no one even asked if I was okay." That's not bitterness. That's exhaustion without appreciation. And here's where the psychology becomes important. When someone feels taken for granted for too long, they stop giving freely. Love becomes transactional. Every unwashed dish, every forgotten anniversary, every what's for dinner becomes another reminder that the scales were never equal. And when life slows down in retirement, when there are fewer distractions and more time to think, that imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. So what starts as exhaustion turns into withdrawal. What begins as silence turns into sarcasm. What used to be quiet tolerance becomes pointed irritation. It's not that she changed overnight, it's that she finally let herself feel all the things she pushed down for decades just to keep the peace. But here's the hopeful part. Many men genuinely don't realize this dynamic until it's pointed out. It's not always malice, it's habit. It's generational norms. It's a lifetime of thinking, well, she's just better at those things, without ever asking if she wants to be. And change doesn't require guilt, it requires recognition. A simple, "I realize how much you've done, and I should have said it more often," can do more than you think. Because at the end of the day, most women don't want a perfect partner. They just want a present one. Someone who sees, appreciates, and shares the load, not just in their younger years, but even more so as they grow older. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Reason 3, emotional neglect in later life. One of the hardest truths many older women face is this. They no longer feel emotionally connected to the man they married. Not because he suddenly became distant, but because he was never really emotionally available to begin with. And now, when emotional closeness matters more than ever, she feels completely alone beside someone she's shared decades with. In our younger years, we often stay too busy to notice emotional neglect. There are jobs to juggle, kids to raise, errands to run. Life moves so fast and it gives couples an excuse to avoid the deeper conversations. But when retirement rolls in and the children move out, all that's left is the space between two people. And that space can feel like a canyon when there hasn't been emotional intimacy for years. Many women grow older craving more than companionship. They want conversation. They want eye contact. They want someone who listens without fixing, who understands without judgment. But instead, what they often get is a man who grunts during dinner, watches TV for hours, and answers important questions with one-word replies. That kind of disconnection doesn't just hurt, it feels like a quiet betrayal. And here's the emotional twist. A woman will often spend decades hoping that once the kids were gone and life slowed down, they'd finally get to connect again. She'll dream of long walks, late-night talks, small surprises that say, "I still see you." But when none of that shows up, something breaks inside. Because now she realizes he's not quiet, because he's tired, he's quiet. Because he doesn't know how, or worse, he doesn't care to try. I once spoke to a woman named Alice, 73 years old, who told me, "When we first got married, he used to ask me how I was feeling. He'd notice when I was sad. Now I could sit across from him and cry into my soup, and he wouldn't even look up. I don't need grand gestures, I just want to feel like I still matter to him." And that right there captures the core of emotional neglect. It's not about drama, it's about the absence of small, consistent signals that say, "You're important to me." What makes this even more painful is that many men don't realize they're doing it. They think silence equals peace, that not fighting means everything is fine. But emotional intimacy isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of connection. And without that, a woman begins to feel like a roommate, not a partner. Psychologically, emotional neglect erodes a person's sense of worth. When someone feels unheard for long enough, they begin to doubt their own value. They start to wonder if they're boring, or overreacting, or expecting too much. And the more they suppress that pain, the more it turns into resentment and sometimes even contempt. So what started as a quiet dinner becomes a battlefield of tension. What once was a loving silence turns into an awkward one. And she might not say it out loud, but inside she's thinking, if I have to spend the rest of my life sitting across from someone who won't even look up from the paper, I might as well be alone. For men watching this, if any part of this sounds familiar, don't retreat in shame. Just begin again. She doesn't want perfection, she wants effort. A genuine, consistent effort to make her feel seen, heard, and valued. That effort can melt away years of cold silence and rebuild a warmth she thought was gone forever. Reason 4, feeling unappreciated after years of sacrifice. If there's one thing that eats away at a woman's heart as she ages, it's the sense that all the sacrifices she made for her family have gone unnoticed. That somehow, her decades of hard work, patience, and self-denial have faded into the background like wallpaper no one pays attention to anymore. She feels like she gave everything, and now no one even remembers what she gave up. You see, in many marriages, especially among older generations, the woman often took on the role of caregiver. She managed the household, raised the children, handled the birthdays, the doctor visits, the late-night school projects, and kept everything running like a well-oiled machine. She put her own dreams on pause so that everyone else could chase theirs. And she didn't complain because that's just what love looked like in her eyes. But when the house gets quieter and she finally has a moment to breathe, a painful question starts to bubble up. Did anyone ever really notice what I did? She looks at her husband, who sits comfortably watching the evening news and wonders, does he realize what I gave up so he could have the life he wanted? And when the answer feels like a silent no, something shifts inside her, not in anger, but in quiet sorrow. The deep resentment doesn't come from needing praise. It comes from needing to be seen, to be valued, to hear someone say, I couldn't have done this without you. And instead, what she often hears is, what's for dinner? Or did you pay that bill? She's not just a wife, she's a lifelong partner. But when she's treated like an assistant or a background fixture, it stings. Take the case of Linda, age 68. For 40 years, she supported her husband's business, raised their 3 kids, and ran the household with barely a break. She told me once, he never asked me what I wanted. He just assumed I'd be there, making everything work. Now the kids are grown, and I sit across from him at dinner, and he doesn't even ask me how my day was. I'm invisible. That word, invisible, is one I've heard from too many older women, and it cuts deep. Here's the psychological layer underneath all this: human beings have a basic emotional need for recognition. Not awards, not applause, just acknowledgement. When someone goes unrecognized for too long, it creates what psychologists call emotional burnout. That's not just feeling tired, it's feeling drained of purpose. Like your presence doesn't matter, like your history has been erased. But here's the good news. This cycle can be broken. It starts with a single sentence. Something as simple as, I was thinking today about everything you've done for our family, and I just want to say thank you. That may sound small, but to a woman who's gone years without being acknowledged, it can feel like a spotlight being turned on after decades in the dark. Older couples don't need grand romantic gestures. They need small, consistent signs that their sacrifices were not in vain. A touch on the arm, a word of thanks, a memory shared out loud that says, I remember when you helped me through that hard time. These are the emotional deposits that build intimacy and reverse resentment. Because in the end, most women don't hate their husbands because of what was done to them. They feel heartbroken by what was never said, never noticed, never appreciated. And the healing begins not with perfection, but with presence. The kind of presence that says, I didn't always show it, but I've always been grateful for you. That sentence alone can begin to restore decades of silent sacrifice. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Reason 5, growing emotional independence and unmet companionship needs. Some women, as they get older, discover something they hadn't expected. They're no longer willing to settle for a life where they feel emotionally disconnected. And the truth is, after decades of focusing on others, raising kids, supporting their husbands, helping aging parents, they begin to reclaim a sense of self. They finally have the space to ask, what do I need now? And very often the answer is emotional connection. Not just routine, not just partnership, but warmth, understanding, and genuine companionship. Here's what's interesting. Many women in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s develop a new kind of emotional independence. They're not afraid to be alone. In fact, many find a kind of peace and solitude that they never had in their earlier years. But here's the twist. They don't want to be lonely. They want to be in relationships where they're not just seen, but heard. Not just respected, but cherished. And if they look across the room and don't feel that from their husband, a quiet sadness starts to build. It's not necessarily that the husband has done something wrong. It's that he stopped showing up in the ways that matter emotionally. Maybe he became more silent, more set in his ways. Maybe he dismissed her worries, told her to just relax, or shrugged off her stories like they didn't matter. Or maybe he still does all the right things, takes out the trash, fixes the sink, but he doesn't make eye contact anymore. Doesn't laugh with her the way he used to. Doesn't sit down and really listen. This growing emotional gap makes a woman feel like she's sharing a life with a roommate instead of a partner. And as her emotional self-awareness grows, so does the discomfort with that arrangement. She's no longer willing to just make do. She starts asking herself tough questions. Is this all there is? Do I really want to spend the rest of my life like this? And let me tell you, this shift can be jarring for men. Many husbands assume that if they're not fighting, everything must be fine. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means resignation, a slow, emotional withdrawal, a pulling away that's not about anger, but about loss. Loss of connection, loss of curiosity, loss of that spark that once made love feel like more than just routine. I once spoke with a woman named Teresa, 72 years old. She told me, I've been married for 45 years. He's never cheated, never hit me, never yelled, but I feel utterly alone. That's a powerful statement. It's a reminder that emotional absence can be just as painful, if not more so, than physical mistreatment. Because when someone is there but not present, it creates a hollow ache that's hard to put into words. This kind of disconnection isn't always intentional. Many men were raised in an era where emotional expression wasn't taught or valued. They were taught to be providers, not emotional partners. So even if they love their wives deeply, they may not know how to express it in a way that lands. That doesn't make them bad husbands, but it does mean there's room for growth. And growth is the key word here. Relationships aren't meant to stand still. They're meant to evolve as we evolve. When a woman begins to emotionally awaken later in life, she wants her relationship to grow with her. She wants deep conversations, shared laughs, mutual discovery. She wants to feel chosen again, not just out of habit, but out of love. That's why some women seem to suddenly pull away in their later years. It's not sudden at all. It's the result of decades of quiet emotional depletion. It's her heart whispering, I need more than this, and finally having the courage to listen. But here's the hopeful part, it's not too late. Emotional connection can be rebuilt, even after years of distance. It starts with presence, with sitting down and saying, tell me what you've been feeling lately. I really want to know. With holding her hand, not out of duty, but out of desire. With showing interest in her again, not just as your wife, but as the remarkable woman she is and has always been. Because the women who seem to grow distant in their older years aren't asking for perfection. They're asking for partnership, real, heartfelt partnership. The kind that says, I see who you're becoming, and I still choose you. When that happens, even the quietest resentment can begin to soften. And what was once drifting apart can become, once again, growing together. Final thoughts. If you're a husband watching this, I hope this hasn't left you feeling blamed or discouraged. That's not the purpose of this video. The truth is, relationships in later life are complex, and they're also full of possibility. Just because things have become distant doesn't mean they have to stay that way. And if you're a woman who's been nodding along, recognizing your own quiet frustrations, I want you to know you're not ungrateful or selfish or difficult. You're human, and what you're feeling is valid. The beauty of growing older is that we finally have the space to reflect on what really matters. And for most of us, that comes down to connection. Whether it's emotional closeness, feeling understood, or simply laughing together like we used to, it's those small, meaningful interactions that make a big life feel worthwhile. When we lose that connection, we don't just feel frustrated, we feel invisible. And no one at any age wants to feel invisible in their own home. But I want to offer some hope here. The truth is, it doesn't take grand gestures to heal a marriage. It starts with little things. A sincere compliment, a moment of curiosity, a walk together without distractions. These are the small doors that open big conversations. These are the ways we say, I still care, without needing to say a word. If you're a couple who's been growing apart, know this, it's not too late to grow back together. But that requires one important step, seeing each other again. Not just with your eyes, but with your heart. Not just through your history, but through who you're both becoming now. You are still changing. You are still growing. And your marriage can grow with you if you let it. So if you've been feeling distance, don't wait for a blow-up or a breakdown to address it. Start with a question, a gesture, a moment of presence. And if your spouse doesn't know how to respond yet, that's okay. Keep showing up. Keep choosing to try. That's what love looks like after 60. It's not about perfection, it's about persistence. It's about showing up even when things feel quiet, especially then. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.